Now we are.
Now we are.
Welcome to the Magician's Table. Yay! We are doing an episode on psychics and psychic abilities. My
I knew
name
you were
is
going to say that. No, I'm just kidding.
My name is Nicole Desiree, and we have Lady Amber on stage. We are, metaphysical professionals. I've been taking a sabbatical, this long extended sabbatical. But when I'm doing my thing, I teach and do readings and healings and all that good witchy woo woo stuff. And Amron does a little bit of the more coaching side of her readings, right?
Right. Yeah. Definitely take a more coaching approach in my practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything new in the world of Lady Amaron? How's nature's lore coming along?
It's coming along good. It's still a baby, but I'm super happy with it and excited and been working on kind of, it's the beginning of the year. So I've been working on kind of the plan for what I want to focus on for this coming year. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's like still the building phase, I think, for a lot of us since
Yeah.
the year. So
Yeah,
very
definitely
good.
still a lot of building to go, but I'm really excited with what this year is gonna hold for me and my business.
Yay! We're like long overdue for a little reading for the business. I love doing business
Yeah,
readings. They're my favorite. I love the
you are
inspiration
super good
and
at it. It's such
building.
like, yeah, your business readings are so, yeah, like inspirational. It's and just really help you see like different aspects and just like, I know there's sometimes I'm like, oh man, yeah, I totally wasn't even thinking about that, or and like, yeah, that should really be something like doing the business. You're really good at that for sure. So
Thank you. Well, we could continue stroking each other's egos, which I guess I will be majorly stroking yours today since we'll be following up from our last session, talking about the reading that we did live together. But unless you have any news or topics to talk about, I did want to bring up that tidbit of news from after our last session. So in our previous episode, when we were talking about spirits, I brought up the woman who married the ghost. She has sadly divorced. So I guess even in the spirit world, there can be what is the term that people use when they divorce of
even after death.
it's just like, I know. It's like, I guess even after death, you can have irreconcilable differences with her ghostly spouse.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
condolences to her and her ghostly maritable demise. So, I guess that's the only like bit of catch up metaphysical news.
Right. Well, like, how could I follow that up with anything?
And then the only other thing I guess that I can really think about right now is I'm really excited that Benabel Wen is releasing the second edition of her first tarot deck. She's taking orders. I think she's only making as many decks as people order. So you do have to pre-order the deck. We can drop a link in the show notes. But she's only taking those reservations, I think, through the end of March. So it's like if anybody wants one of those, I know that they're going to become collectible decks. So if you're a deck collector, it's one that you have to have, and it comes with loads of free extras and like including a class and a book and a coloring book.
Right. Like
And
Benabel, like, man, she does not half-ass anything.
no, I
Like,
mean,
she's
she
awesome. I love her.
just like she's almost not even human. I mean,
Right? I know.
like where does she find the time? It's just crazy. Um, so that I guess that's a little bit on the metaphysical news. So we can jump right in our topic.
Jump in. All
like
right.
psychic. um, so after we recorded the last session, Amron sent me a list of questions about psychicness, and there was such a great list of questions. I figured we'd just tackle them one by one. With the first one, of course, with defining what psychicness is. Like, what does it mean to be a psychic? And that's too, I think, really important to point out. Just like when we use the word psychic, we're either referring to a person, a psychic, like a fortune teller, what we were talking about during the last episode,
Right.
and um, or an ability. She is psychic. She has a psychic ability. That's usually what we're referring to. But it's like, what exactly does that mean?
Right.
Um,
And see, this is something that like I usually, you know, go through and research, and I love research and learning about all sorts of things. This is something that I haven't actually done yet, and so and of course I knew Nicole like knows the shit out of all this kind of stuff. So I just figured I'd leave it to her expertise. But I'm like, yeah, so like to me, my basic understanding of a psychic or being psychic is, what we see in the media and everything, which I know isn't fully, I'm like, but that's like when somebody says, "Oh, you're psychic," and I'm like, "Well, I don't do fortune telling. I don't think, I don't, see spirits, and I don't, and all this kind of, that whole like, Hollywood thing." Um, and so yeah, so I'm like, I cannot wait to hear, like the real full definition of like what this actually, means and everything. So
Well, I think it's really important that you put that framework around it. It's really important to keep in mind that when people use the word psychic, they're usually referring to this image, this like stereotypical mythological being developed out of Hollywood or out of television portrayals, when really the word, like the root word, comes from antiquitous times. So we're looking at ancient civilizations referring to psychic, like, or psyche, or what is the Greek word? Psychikos, which is very Greek, right?
right.
Has the ends in KOS. Doesn't get much more Greek than that. Um, but going off of that, so the word is developed from that psychikos from ancient Greek, and that in and of itself simply means soul. So that kind of goes back to our previous conversation of what is like life after death, what exactly is the soul, where is the soul arriving from, and we talked about potential philosophies of what the soul is, or like where it's arriving from, and that for the most part, most people think that the soul is somehow associated with the brain or consciousness, and that consciousness is coming from the brain, right? But it's this soulful thing that psychicness is. But when we're referring to it, the more like modern term, it's loosely anything that's associated with non-physical forces, unseen forces, something that's beyond. From the I'm just looking at like the Merriam-Webster dictionary because they've been around for a while, so they kind of have a lot of these word, definitions scholarly nailed down. But
But and just to like totally go on a small tangent with that, is that an interesting fact about dictionaries is depending on the dictionary of the time, like if you go back and like if you look at the dictionary, define the word psychic in the current dictionary, it could say this. But if you go back to a dictionary printed, however many years ago, it could be like way different. And
right.
just a fun fact about dictionaries and how
No, that's a really good point, because not only do dictionaries evolve, but so do our, and I know where you're going, it's like, so do our religious texts. Like
Oh yeah.
our histories evolve over time. Language is living within us. It's not something that's static, and it's the same thing with concepts. Concepts are always evolving. History is always evolving. We tend to think of history as being factual, but it's only so factual in the eyes of the beholder. And there's a whole, like, that's almost a whole other conversation. But yeah, so we depart away from like ancient Greece with this idea of the word psychic, psychikos, meaning soul or relating to spirit, to now arriving to this like these definitions of lying outside the sphere of physical science or knowledge. So it's like outside the bounds of what is known. It's seeking beyond the known into the unknown, um, being sensitive to non-physical or supernatural forces or influence, marked by the extraordinary or mysterious sensitivity, perception, or understanding. So that's like, you know, I don't know how we're describing psychic abilities. Its relationship to the world is that it's beyond the world as we know it. To be a psychic is someone who is sensitive to those non-physical forces. Yeah, I feel like this is a cop-out definition. It's like psychic as a noun means psychic phenomena. Just like, okay, well, what exactly? You can't use the word in the definition. Um, we do tend to use the word psychic interchangeably with clairvoyant, which I think is really interesting that we're putting an emphasis on the ability to see in the mind's eye something that's beyond, when we know, and we meaning like Amron and I know, that there's a whole list of psychic abilities that has nothing to do with seeing or having vision. Um, People who channeling and mediumship and clairvoyance and psychic all tend to be interchangeable. And then it's not on this list, at least I don't think it's on this list of definitions, but it's also commonly associated with telepathy. So being able to speak or hear from the mind, in the mind's ear, or like conceptually communicating with someone. And I think that has more to do with the history of like people who are psychic, right? And I think that like moves nicely into another one of your questions of like, so what's the history of psychicness?
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned previously this class that I took on magic in the Middle Ages.
Right.
They set up the framework for that class of going into antiquitous times, of ancient times, specifically ancient Rome, is where we see this first really marked splitting of groups, in terms of how magic is interpreted. So since ancient times, and probably since prehistoric times, because we see these the cave paintings and things that were left by prehistoric humans that often have reference to gods and ritual, and all of these things are overlapping with some amount of magic. It's hard to discuss a lot of metaphysical things without discussing magic, and
Right.
psychicness is kind of a big part of that. But we start to see laws against these magical practices, and this is where you first see these like definitions of defined roles of magician. I don't think that people use explicitly the word psychic until later on, which ties into dictionaries. Actually, you don't see this referral of a person being a psychic until the 17th century, which is the 1600s, and that's exactly when the first dictionaries were being written and published.
Oh, now that's interesting. Huh.
Right? Yeah. So before that, you see a greater focus on terms like necromancer, magician, witch, conjurer, people who have a variety of skills beyond mediumship. Um, But
So
I mean, you do see the word.
the general metaphysician, if you will, it's like it's that it was all considered kind of one thing. Then a psychic was a witch, was a necromancer, was a, kind of, it was all essentially the same thing. It just depended on what male, female, various whatnot. But it was essentially
Yeah,
someone that worked in the metaphysical field of in some degree. Is that what?
yeah, and I feel like this relates to prehistoric humans and then early humans, and even to a certain extent up to modern day, depending on where you are in the world, and that we in the past there was an inseparable relationship between religion and a kind of rule of law or governance.
Right. Typically in old, yeah, for pretty much up until modern society, state and religion were inseparable. I mean, it was like you didn't, you could be, because you set up your state, laws and everything based on your religion.
Right. And I mean, America's really not that different. There's a
Well,
lot
it
of
started that way, at least.
that started that way. Yeah. And that now it's departed. So what I'm getting to here is then when we were in more tribal groups or hunter gathering groups, you usually had a designated person as a medicine man or a healer or someone who was the communicator to spirit or to God or a deity. There's always been a kind of position for the mystical person,
Mm-hmm.
and that mystical person held a position of power, of honor, um, and and I think it's, once you start seeing these great civilizations like ancient Rome and ancient Egypt, that you see this shift in who holds the power to talk to God, like who holds the power to possess and utilize magic, right? Because if it's this beyond the known powerful thing, then the person who is the ruler of the country or has the money is going to want to possess an aspect of that power or have power over the person that has that power. And
Right.
so the reason why this university in Barcelona developed this class on medieval magic and the Middle Ages is that's when you start seeing written law against people who are practicing these psychic abilities. And you don't really see the term psychic like really being utilized until the 1600s. And this is all just to say, like, there is this very rich history and relationship to the psychic, whether they were called the psychic at that time or not, but were obviously in possession of psychic abilities. And that we don't see this shift from this like powerful, revered, respected person to the shammy con artist that we see today until later on. You start to see that more prevalently, like after these laws are made in the Middle Ages, and you start seeing systematic extermination of groups of people that aren't that are threatening to those societies, that are perceived as being threatened, and you see laws in the Middle Ages against them, and you see this in American history when we have the Salem witch hunts, that whenever there is somebody who is confidently wielding these supernatural powers, it's perceived as a threat, and it's not perceived as a joke until, like the end of the 19th century and more prevalently in the 20th century,
Right.
which I think is really interesting.
And not even that, but that's just in America.
And that's just here. Yeah.
Other places in the world, they still fully believe in the classic, witch, and doing witch hunts and all this kind of stuff, like they were doing here, with the Salem witch trials and everything. So yeah, it's,
Absolutely.
that even then just depends on where you are, because some cultures still fully, go with that kind of, yeah, upsets their laws and religion to, to do that. And they don't. I guess my point is they don't take it as a joke like we do now. You call somebody a witch now, you know, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Actually, take it as like no, like this person is really a practicing, what we might call like a witch or a psychic or something. Um,
Exactly. Yes, yes. Like we have a very clear um division in our history of when a lot of the oral traditions were wiped out, not just from like the witches in Salem or just generally like folk magic that Europeans, white people brought to America, but that uh, practicing any kind of magic was systematically removed from native cultures and
right.
also from the African cultures that were brought in.
Mhm.
So this is something that is more specific to American identity of finding um, magic and psychicness to be more humorous, less believable because there isn't scientific evidence. It's something that's like weirdly different about us, which is something that I can't speak to too much. And I mean, I could talk about like laws and how culture has changed for a long time. But this is more about the fun parts of what
Right. This is
psychicness
more
is.
kind of defining because like yeah, I'm really kind of like, you know, with this, conversation at least, going more into like the uh I guess, kind of like, okay, well, for me, as a practicing metaphysician, that at this point doesn't use the word psychic really, to describe myself. Um, because of the not because I know that it's wrong or that, I don't fit into that category or whatever, but more because like, okay, well, in general, if you say I'm psychic in public, yeah, what conjures up in everybody's mind is okay, the neon sign and the fortune teller, and oh, the crystal ball and all that kind of stuff. And joke, and you're not only not taken seriously, but then considered to be, yeah, kind of that fringe person that is kind of like, yeah, we don't know if we should stone you or laugh at you or so it's like I'm kind of like curious to like get down to like, okay, well, what, like, yeah, what fits into that box, and what, is it, because I'm sure that it's more than just what Hollywood makes it look like,
Yeah.
like with tarot cards drives me crazy now, of course, that I'm use cards and everything myself, that when I see somebody, it's inevitable when you see somebody on the TV or in a movie or something and they whip out the tarot cards, and it's always the tower or death, and it
It's
always
like always.
something like very literal, like, oh yeah, you're gonna die, or your husband's gonna die. Motherfucker, just but it is like, but that's all it ever is. And it's, almost always, not always, sometimes it's just that fun, quirky little girl that, it has, all black or whatever, but sometimes it's like that full on, like, gypsy looking, like we were talking about last time. But I'm like, so there's so many things like that what I do know is like, yeah, Hollywood, okay, it's kind of funny. And I get that, for the purposes of their story or whatever, that's what they need or what, but I'm like, but that is so not true, so it's one of those things. I figure like the perception that we've been diluted with of the psychic is similar, in that way. So,
Absolutely. And I think it's important to bring up the root word and the historical context to show that this idea of the psychic being a joke is really more of our modern creation.
right.
And when you're making something a joke, you're disarming it of power. And so, in a way, we have this continuing effect of disarming the power of the magician, of the psychic, by putting the magician in a tuxedo at a kid's birthday party and the psychic behind a neon sign with a 1-800 number, like Miss Cleo of the 90s, like that kind of thing. Which tells you how old I am. Because nobody remembers Miss
Miss
Cleo.
I don't remember that. I'm way too young for that.
That's right. She was like inescapable. Like if you watched TV anywhere at all in the 90s,
Oh my
her
god.
her like advertisement always came up. It was just like she probably wasn't Jamaican or whatever at all. Like she probably
But the funny thing is like, yeah, it was so much of it that I still to this day, like I got it, in my brain subliminally so many times, I can still hear her exact voice. Like, no, I'm not going to try and like reproduce it for you here, but I'm like, I can hear it in my head. I can hear her voice, and that, oh my god, yeah, I was like, oh, too much.
and and that's that. And so to me, that's the thing. It's like, well, okay, it raises the question: why is the psychic a joke, right? Or why are psychics shrugged off so easily? And it really was because there was this perception of threat, this perception of power, um, in hundreds of years ago, which again is what, like, why we had the Salem witch trials and the witch hunts here, and systematic eradication of folk magic, wherever it was coming from, whatever culture it was coming from. And that we have this opportunity in history because we're connecting on a massive scale on the internet to say, like, no, the some of these traditions are family traditions that should be preserved and passed down. That psychic abilities, that will, like, we're going to more clearly define here, that psychic abilities are not possessed by the few, that it's part of a really important set of like survival skills, survival coping mechanisms that we have built into our DNA. Like, this is not something that's gifted from a spirit. It really is part of our consciousness.
Right. It's
And
not just the select few, or, that just happen to be born with that one magical little genome or whatever. It's, yeah, it's a great, everybody is born with this, in some level, in some way, some fashion. It's, yeah, it is innate within us at from the very beginning. Yeah.
I like, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's innate in everyone. Um, okay, so let's talk about then more really, okay, what is the psychic? We've already determined that psychicness deals with the beyond, right? And so when we talk about the beyond, it's beyond knowledge. So it's beyond cause of, when you're doing a math problem, 1 + 2 = 3. It's like if you're joining two with an extra one, then you have this grouping of three. And we tend to think, we, meaning at least Americans in the Western, world, we tend to think about things of like, okay, well, there has to be causation, there has to be tangible evidence, we have to have a root to this knowledge. And the thing about psychicness is that that bypasses that process. We don't gather evidence to come to a conclusion. We arrive at the conclusion within us through mysterious means that we have yet to define scientifically. But it doesn't mean there isn't causation for it. I just think that science isn't there. When we talk about neuroscience in general, science of the brain, there is so much that we haven't figured out yet. Like, we don't really know how the brain is generating consciousness in general. And the science community has yet to determine if subconscious or unconsciousness truly exists. And if it exists, how is it actually working? Like, these are things that they're still defining. But there are some certain things that the science community can't agree on. It's like we do have instincts, right? We have natural instincts of,
Like the gut instinct is what you're talking about. Like when you get that, like, oh, you're walking down this dark, part of the, town or whatever, and you get that like really bad, like, oh shit, feeling in your stomach, like I should turn around now. That's kind of what is that just innate or that inward. Wait a minute, something's wrong here.
yeah, and I think that it's not an accident that you are choosing an example where the person is in danger, because I think that this is part of our survival mechanism, that we
Right.
are instinctively uh, pushed away from danger and enticed by things that are good for us, or enticed by things that we can potentially be addicted to. Like we are
Mhm.
more likely to choose things that have a certain combination of fat, sugar, and salt to eat because it's going to make the brain really happy instinctively. But we also instinctively stay away from poison, right? It's like
Right.
if you're really thirsty, you're not going to unconsciously grab a bottle of bleach. You're going to go grab a glass of water. And I mean, that's like a really sensational kind of example. But
But I mean, it goes back to like, or if you think about it, like if you the animal, that's what animals do. They instinctively, can tell. It's like, oh yeah, that food isn't good anymore. I'm not going to eat it. Or my stomach feels bad. I need to go eat some grass. Or yeah, I need some water or something. Or yeah, this is a dangerous situation. I'm gonna like go run upstairs or something. So they have that, and they're way more in tune with it than humans are because we've dumbed ourselves down. But
yeah, and then we've become so dependent.
you know we you know we have those same survival skills essentially.
Right.
In us, it's just we're not as in tune with them anymore because of a whole bunch of things. But
A whole bunch of things. And our survival mechanisms, I think, extend beyond. So intuition is not necessarily interchangeable with instinct. So, and there are scientific reasons for that, of like what instincts really are as part of like a primal DNA, primal genetic makeup of that. When you come out of your mother's wound, to a certain extent, like you're going to instinctively try to draw that breath of air, and,
right.
and, and it's not something that you're not taught to breathe. It's just something that's going to happen instinctively to help you survive. But I
Hmm.
feel intuition is an extension of instinct, where it's different. Like instinct is going to help you do something out of necessity, whereas intuition might drive you to do something out of spiritual fulfillment, uh,
Hmm.
destiny, almost like there's some kind of, yeah, combination, twisting of destiny and fate that happens when you're using your intuitive ability to connect with something. And I think a lot of people utilize their intuitive abilities unconsciously. They're not even thinking about it. And
Yeah.
that what makes a psychic different is that they are tuning into that intuition consciously. They're consciously activating that skill. It's a skill. It's almost like a muscle. It's mental calculation that happens so quickly that you don't even understand where the thought is arriving from. And that's like the important defining aspect of psychicness and intuition, of you don't know where the concept is arriving from, but you're arriving with it like very quickly.
Hmm.
And I think the clairvoyant aspect of it then is it's just easier for us, for those of us that have sight, to understand what it means to see something in the mind's eye. So it's like if I'm telling you to envision an apple, which is an example that we drew upon in a previous episode, your apple could be red and my apple could be green.
Right.
We're both envisioning the concept of an apple, but we could be envisioning different types of apples. So it's just the
Right.
concept there. Where a psychic ability becomes useful is if somebody's trying to name a business and the psychic is just like, I see an apple, you know, you could arrive to the conclusion like, okay, well, I could name this company Apple, I could name it Macintosh. Like I could, foresee this being a strong name that's going to carry weight of something. And that's a very minor thing to be discussing with, at the psychics table. You're mostly not going to be talking about things like that. Most people come to the table on ideas of romance, finance, and stability. Those are usually
But
the
I mean, kind of going back to, you know, like you were mentioning earlier about you love to do business readings. And,
oh, yeah.
so you kind of, somewhat, market to that clientele. So in a sense, like, okay, well, if I go to you and say, yeah, I need help with some aspect of my business. I'm at a wall. I just don't know where to go or whatever. Essentially I'm going to a psychic and, asking, yeah, what should I name my business? I don't, any thoughts, here? Uh, and, and again, that doesn't necessarily, that in and of itself, that would not lead to a predictive type of reading necessarily, like we were talking about last time. I mean, I could, I guess, if you wanted to go into that whole, oh yes, I see this, if you name your business this, then you'll be a millionaire in 10 years and all this. I mean, it could. I
Right.
really wanted to take it that way, but um, so
Yeah, it's like I accidentally pulled out what is actually like a complex example of like when you're trying to name a business, you can look at it at so many different perspectives of the numerology portion of it and what kind of vibration does the name have, and then on the logical sense, is this testing well in the market and blah blah blah. But I mean, it's just, like going back to the apples, right? Of most people interchangeably refer to psychics as clairvoyant when not every psychic is clairvoyant, and I think that's a really important distinction, and it's a really unfortunate thing that we use the terms interchangeably enough that when you look up the definition of psychic, in most cases you'll see a second, like one of the defining terms of it as being clairvoyant.
right.
And that leads us to the clairs. um so what does clairvoyance really mean here? It means
Tell us.
clear. Yeah, right. So anything with clair, as the prefix, means clear. And then the ending word is usually the type of clarity that you're achieving. So with clairvoyance, we mean clear sight. So with the second word, voyance, relating to voyeur, which is seeing, sight. Um, and there's like a whole family of clairs, some more prominent than others. But the idea is that these are secondary senses, or like they're senses beyond senses. So clairvoyance is meaning to see, right? But a lot of us already see. Like we already have sight. We have sight for the things like I'm looking at you right now
Right.
on my iPhone. But this is the seeing beyond, and that's where you get the psychicness. So the psychicness is, we've already determined, is something that's beyond knowledge, or we can even say familiarity of the everyday experience. So when
Kind of
you're
beyond something beyond like something that can't be explained.
right,
It's kind of what I'm getting is like yeah, you can't go to a scientist and they can explain like, okay, yes, this is where you got that from, or this is where you saw that vision from, or whatever. It's something that is kind of in the unexplainable zone. It doesn't mean it's not real. Doesn't mean it's, made up or from the devil or whatever, but it's just, as of right now, it cannot be quantified, is maybe the right word, and defined in our nice neat little boxes that we like to put things in.
yeah. I mean, that's part of us being human. We love putting things in little boxes so that our brains can understand them.
Right.
And that's, I think, what makes a lot of the relationship with the psychic really uncomfortable, is that um, it's difficult to teach someone how to engage with their own intuitive skills, because it's not like lifting a weight or uh, doing a multiplication table. Like it's something that is unique to each person, and
Mhm.
it's an invisible kind of experience. It's an experience happening within you. And that is a really hard thing to try to convey to somebody.
Right.
But getting back to this, like seeking beyond the senses, so it's like you have the clairvoyance, which is the clear seeing. There's clairaudience, which is clear hearing. And then you have and those are the most prominent ones, and most of us experience those on a daily basis without thinking twice about it, which is funny that anybody would doubt psychic abilities when everybody has them.
But again, it's like nobody stops and notices that it's even happening. And it's funny, it's like, back to kind of like that gut feeling thing. It's like, when I started to become more aware of all these things, and I started to notice like the times where I would just be like, oh, you know, I really just don't think I should go out to the grocery store today. Or maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I need to just go ahead and do that and not wait, or something, just that like feeling of like, I don't know why I feel like I should or shouldn't or whatever. But then going, sometimes I would go with that and sometimes I wouldn't, but I would consciously be aware of that feeling and then my decision of to do or not to do or whatever, and then consciously aware of the outcome. Sometimes it'd be like, okay, well, I decided not to go out today, not to go downtown or whatever. And later on, I turn on the news, huge wreck, just totally obliterated, like the whole fucking interstate or something. I'm like, glad I didn't, and kind of paying attention to that. Like, I wonder if that was like that innate sense of, you don't want to get in the middle of that, kind of thing,
Yeah.
whether to be in the accident or just in the traffic of it, or, or something. And, or, kind of on the other end, let's go ahead and do it today because tomorrow, there's a fucking blizzard that just happens. And, I wouldn't be able to get out, and then I'd be stuck in the house without food. And, so it's really interesting, as I started to realize that for myself. And then I would start pointing it out to other people, like my boyfriend and stuff. And it's like, and he'd go, man, I just really, this and that. I was like, well, maybe you should listen to that. And
Right.
so I've noticed with him and other people that, yeah, when you point that out and they start to actually become aware of it, regardless of what they do with it, but become aware of it, and then, see that whole progression of, okay, the feeling, what you do with it, and then the result, and all this is quite fascinating. But yeah, so many times, like most people aren't even aware of all these tiny little things that just, pop in and out. And yeah, it's really, that's what it is. It's like
Yeah. Well,
we all have these abilities to some degree. It's
and
just,
there's a like really small example too of what you're talking about of, okay, so how many times in your life have you, just suddenly thought about somebody of like, huh, I haven't really thought about her or him in a long time. And then all of a sudden they call you on the
oh
phone,
my God.
they send
Yeah.
you a message or something like that. And
Love that.
it's funny, it's like that, so then on these list of the common definitions or interpretations of psychicness is often associated with telepathy. So it's like if somebody isn't associating them with clairvoyance, which is just seeing the thing in the mind's eye, which we all do, which we just like we've demonstrated that.
Mhm.
The other thing is telepathy, and telepathy is something that we all really do engage with on a regular basis, though we do it unconsciously,
Right.
and it ends up being these synchronicitous kinds of things of like, oh, I was just thinking of my mom today and decided to give her a call just to find out that, she got word of something from a doctor, or, had a bad day, or, something like that. Yeah, it doesn't even have to be something so sensational of like, oh, she's just having a bad day, needs a pick me up or something, something like that. And we do a lot of these things, or even, getting back to business, since that's kind of like my strong suit of, trying to come up with a business solution, and then you're like, maybe I should bring Johnny in onto this project or something. And then you call up and Johnny, and he just like happens to exactly have the right resource or answer to your business problem at that exact time.
Hmm.
NPR did a series of interviews with founders of major businesses, and the only one I can remember outright is the founders of Instagram, which I can't even remember their name, but I just remember their story of uh, them being asked, what's the most important aspect of your business development, and they almost every CEO at some point manages to mention intuition as a leading guide for their business. And almost every major CEO or leader will tell you that listening to your gut instincts, just truly taking a chance on yourself and your ideas, is usually going to be the way forward towards success. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, why is that? And it's just like, do you really, really have to be so grounded and certain in these concepts and analysis? Or sometimes you just need to break free of that. It's just like, I got this gut feeling. What would happen if I took a chance on it? It's like, how bad is failure? We put such an emphasis, like a demonization
Right.
on failure,
Failure.
when usually failure is the only path to success.
Right.
Kind of crazy.
And yeah, and uh, yeah, it's so interesting. And without even like going to any kind of like, woo woo place or whatever, just yeah, like the acknowledgement that, oh yeah, I just had this feeling like that this was the right name for it, so I went with it, or whatever. And it, yeah, it happens to all of us. It's just
Yeah.
what we do with it. And um yeah, but back to the telepathy thing, I think it's an interesting point also. And to point out that what I've noticed now in these years is that now I have not actually spent any time actively developing telepathy for myself. Um, but I've noticed that, those little synchronicities, like you were saying, of like, oh, I was thinking about my mom, and then, she called or whatever, or, I was thinking, oh, let me just call her, for, I don't know why, just check in or whatever. And then something big happened or something. And that could be like with anybody, but I've noticed like the closer you are with somebody, like, and not necessarily on a physical level, but the stronger that can be, because I've noticed
Yeah.
now, I'm what several states away from my mom now. She's down in Florida and we're here in North Carolina. So we're not physically close to each other at all, but we are very close to each other in, pretty much every other way. And yeah, so many times I've noticed now that, yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's either like, oh, we were thinking about each other, and then one of us ends up, calling, or, and almost every conversation starts with, I was just thinking about you, I was just gonna call you or something, literally almost every conversation. And, or something like, yeah, like I'm just, thinking, I know we talked yesterday. I just need to call, for some reason. And, then she's like, oh yeah, this just happened, or that just happened, or I just talked to this person and I wanted to tell you. And, just something. So yeah, that would seem so synchronistic, but it's like constant. I'm like, okay, well, I think, and it doesn't happen to me with anybody else on that level. But I'm like, my mom and I are so close and connected with each other, uh, that I think it has developed between us more significantly than just like me in general, of like, connecting to you or connecting to some random person, wherever or something.
I think it's really interesting that um, this kind of human experience tends to be summed up in the phrase "speak of the devil," of like when you're thinking or speaking of somebody, and then all of a sudden they appear, whether they're appearing on a phone or actually in person or some other conversation or concept.
Right.
And that we say speak of, and I don't know what the actual history is of that, although I'm pretty sure it has to do with some kind of a story or something, possibly not even biblical, but just more of a mythological context of speaking of like, speak of the devil and he shall appear.
Right.
But I think it's funny though that that phrase is jokingly referred to as if to disarm and ridicule this skill that we have to perceive the beyond. Like we are consistently societally discounting that we have these gifts together and that
Right. It's
we've
just tossed
all
into this
experienced
whole,
these
oh, well,
things.
yeah, it was just it happened. It was just a coincidence. It was, whatever, instead of actually like, well, damn, how many coincidences are you gonna like
Right.
require before it's not just a coincidence,
And we universally experience our unique coincidences in a same manner. And that a coincidence is simply a circumstance with a low probability of happening,
Right.
but that they consistently happen is the thing that makes it so mysterious. Of like, these aren't one in a billion things if they're happening all the time. Um, so I think that's interesting. And so I'm just like looking at our questions. I feel like we've answered a lot of like, okay, we have our definition of psychic, which is somebody possessing a skill or ability to see or know something that is beyond founded knowledge. Um, and what it is to be a psychic. Well, really, what it really is that we are all psychic, right? Like, I mean, we can discuss the stereotypical fortune teller experience again, but it's like we covered that
Right.
over a lot of ground
Right.
um, in detail. I mean, we can talk more about specific psychic abilities and how they work, um, or how to strengthen psychic abilities that one possesses. I don't know. I'm like, what turn do we want the conversation to take? Or we could dive into the reading that you did for me and how a psychic reading unfolds, which I am arguing that it was psychic in context because we weren't working upon founded knowledge and logical, rational calculations
Right.
to arrive at the answer to the question. We were using intuitive inspiration
Right.
as a
And
guide.
so that before we get in, because I think that's a really great place to go. But before we get into that, so wanted to again just stop on that point of we're all psychic, because it is, and that's and whether you want to call it, psychic or whatever, but every person on the planet, has all of the, all the clairs, all the, whatever to some degree. Now, some like I am an empath, um, and that is innately very, very strong in me. Telepathy, obviously I can do it to some degree, but it's not something that's like super strong. I'm like, I can't just like go talk to whoever through my mind, whenever I want or something. But all we all have them to some degree, but this is going to be stronger in this person, this one's going to be stronger in this person, just innately. And then also it's muscle, it's just whatever, like, okay, well, if I want to be more telepathic, I just need to practice. you know
Yeah, that's a
and
great
I like
point.
that seeing
Exactly.
as great as somebody who is born with that more strongly, and then also uh, um, practice, with that skill. But it's not to say that I can't do it, respectably, well.
Right. Yeah,
But
and I think we have a lot of examples of how cognitively different we are as human beings. It's like when we're in school, you can pretty well pick out who's really good at math, who's really good at art, who's really good at English, and that you might all be taking the general classes together and applying yourself to one degree or another, but that we all have the opportunity to learn this wide scope of different subjects and topics and skills. And I think that psychic abilities are very, very similar. Many of us will have a natural aptitude toward one over another.
Hmm.
We we do have access to all of them to some degree, with
Right.
maybe a few exceptions like telekinesis, which is moving things with the mind.
Right.
And I know, like,
I
look, and
keep
so now
talking
you
now,
like
and I'm like, someday I'm gonna get that.
I, it's like I see you roll your eye, and I'm like, have we met the bounds of the types of psychicness that you believe in, or are you just jealous that you don't have that one?
No, just jealousy. That's all that is. And
Because I
and to totally go into the geek zone for a second, when I think of something like the telekinesis and stuff, I go into the Matrix, and the
yeah,
fucking kid with that spoon,
with the
man. It's like there is
spoon.
no spoon, and I'm like, dude, there is no spoon. It's like but for real. It's like
It's
so,
so real. It's almost like they play a joke on people who are really in the metaphysical world of like, I know there isn't a freaking spoon there. How can I get around mine? And I think in part it's because when the spoon is your spoon in your hand, you've been so conditioned to fit within the natural laws that you can't not think of it as a solid object, as a spoon, when
right,
really there is more open space between everything than there is solidified matter. It's
right.
just
Like,
such a warp.
yeah, just to touch into the science of it, everything in the universe is energy, and it's you know bending that spoon isn't necessarily bending a metal object. It's rearranging energy, which we
Right.
we as energetic beings can tap into energy because everything is energy. So it's just, again, it's being aware and being, have an understanding of how to do it. It's not bad. It's not from, oh, only people that have been sold their soul to the devil can manipulate energy or something, and it's just, yeah, but it's just, yeah, everything's energy. So why couldn't, you bend the spoon because with your mind, you know.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. And I think also bringing up the energy aspect of this. So you have a strong connection to empathy, which I don't know if you defined it of I don't think that you did define it. So
oh, I didn't define it. No, I don't think I did.
yeah, so empathy is having the ability to experience another person's emotions, right?
Right.
And I think that there is room for scientific explanation for that. Of like, we have like, to get like the biological sense, we're made up of all of these little cells and molecules and whatever, and part of that is possessing these ganglia, and these ganglia have mirroring aspects. So like if somebody yawns and you um, involuntarily yawn, and part of that's part of our mirroring ganglia aspects of ourselves. And it's that like mirroring effect where we're perceiving something invisible, or like the person, you see a person who smiles and then you might smile back and you're mimicking that. But it's beyond mimicry. Like when you're mimicking something, you can make a conscious voluntary choice to do so. But when you're mirroring somebody instinctively, it's again part of that like primal DNA thing. And I think again, it's all goes back these survival mechanisms. Like these are tools that were given to us in order to live and thrive and reproduce and be able to expand, expand the
Natural
species.
universe, not just in our man-made metropolis,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like something that is bestowed onto us as much as breathing,
Right.
that
Exactly.
kind of thing. So I think with empathy is a part of our survival mechanism, because in order to um, experience and feel somebody's feelings, you're understanding how you're affect that, like you as a person, that you're affecting the collective, and can also help solve problems for the collective that's going to perpetuate the survival of humanity. Right. And I think a lot of these psychic abilities are very closely related to that kind of concept. Like they are here to help us survive as individuals and as part of the collective. Like they're,
Right.
and that there's probably room for science in there. We just haven't gotten to that point yet.
Right. I think
I don't.
I think it's just that you know, I heard I don't know, I think I read it somewhere or something, that um magic is simply like something that science hasn't
Hasn't
caught up with yet or
explained.
something. I'm
Yeah, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson refers to that, and it might have even been a quote by Carl Sagan, was an astrophysicist, um, that is known in science because he made the show about the cosmos and trying to explain the universe in a way that everybody can understand, and that magic isn't a bad word. Magic is just science unexplained.
science unexplained. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
I knew if
I
if
knew
I
I butchered
teased it
it
out, we
totally.
were gonna arrive there.
But yeah, so it's like, I agree. I totally think that, you know, yeah, all these abilities and everything. It's not that it could never be explained scientifically. It's just that, we're not there yet. I mean, it's still, and you got to keep in mind too, with that, on that scientific level, that how much we do know about like how the human body works and how the universe works, and all these things. We know a lot, but there's still a shit ton of stuff that we don't know, even just
Yeah.
about how the human body works, much less, the brain itself, and all this kind of stuff. So it's, I think that's also important to keep in mind. It's like we don't know everything that there is to know at this point. And if yeah, then therefore, if we can't define, how, being an empath works, then it has to be, something crazy or natural or something. It's like, no, we actually don't. There's still so much, as much as we do know, there's still, so much more that we don't know.
And
Um,
it really is, like the moment science explains one thing, the only thing that they've really encountered or have a firm knowledge on are the thousands of questions they didn't know that they needed to ask.
right.
That's another thing that Neil deGrasse Tyson brought up, is because I listen to Star Talk, and I love those like conversations, and I know that he can be a little bit condescending and pretentious, but that's how the intellectual community is. And I do love that admission, though. Like I think that that's a really important admission, that um in the pursuit of knowledge and science, the only thing that we ever get closer to is understanding the scope of what we do not know, and the uncertainty of what we think we know. Like, like there's, because science, history, and language is always changing, which is actually, that's how we started this conversation, that
Right.
the concept of the word psychic has evolved over time from being this reference to spirit or soul to all of a sudden transforming into this carnival trick or something, that this is a trick, that, I mean, and they're put in the same camp as magicians, which who are also ridiculed these days. Like,
Right.
and by these days, I mean like in the past like 200 or 300 years, like to put these days in context, it's just like in more like modern industrial humanity, since there's been written, printed history, there's been an intellectual shift in consciousness,
Right.
which is interesting because we think we're getting so much closer to the truth, and yet we are denying truth. Like there's evidence all around us of these things existing. And is it because we are afraid? Are we afraid of it because we can't explain of it, or are we afraid of it because it has power?
And probably both.
Unexplainable.
Probably
Yeah.
both. And then also because if, I think, we can get into the religion thing too. It's like, well, man, if this is real, it has power and I can't control it. If somebody else is doing that, and I don't like that because it doesn't go with my religion and what I want the world to be. So, which fucking Salem witch all over again, but yeah, I think it's a mix of all of that, really, to any degree.
And I mean, you're bringing up a good point too about I didn't even talk about any of the religious historical context beyond the positioning of the healer, medicine person, medicine man, medicine woman in a group, and then later like court magicians or prophets were a thing. And we see this written in biblical context, right? Like when Moses went to the Pharaoh, and he was seen as a great magician because of his staff and all of the bringing of all the plagues and stuff.
Well, and they literally, like, yeah, because he went and he was doing all these, tricks or what were perceived as what the magicians did. And so, yeah, Pharaoh literally, he brought in his magicians, to say, oh, well, my magic workers can do the same thing. So what makes you so special, kind of thing, and that was quite literally what, what happened there. And I mean, it's not that Moses was doing, party tricks or whatever, but, he was perceived as magician because that was their reference. And, they had magicians that would do the party tricks that, looked the same or whatever. So.
Yeah. And so then, you have this written context of the psychic, the medium, the magician being, a court appointed position where you would identify out of a group of people who has the best or strongest uh, natural ability to conjure supernatural experiences. And it becomes written into law. So, as Christianity starts spreading around the world, that's really, it's like I glossed over that. That's really where you start to see these huge divisions between or definitions of defining, what magic is, what a magician is. Is it good or bad? Where is this power coming from? And it's really when Christianity starts, well, I guess it predates Christianity, because Christianity is birthed from Jesus, like Jesus Christ. But if you go before that, even in Judaic historical context, there's an idea that engaging with magic, engaging with psychic abilities, is in some way engaging with evil, demonic influence of like where, because the ability is unknown, where is the power coming from? Where is the information coming from? And so there's just this automatic default that anybody who's leveraging any of these abilities, which were once taken seriously, they are dabbling with the devil's work. And I think that's really interesting because not every magician or act of magic in the Bible is considered demonic, right? Like there are cases, like in the case of Moses, where his abilities were given to him directly from God. Like
Right. And I think like, yeah, on that biblically speaking, it was like, if it wasn't coming from God, then yeah, it would be coming from the devil, kind of thing. And if it's, yeah, like Moses, okay, what he did, yeah, he did directly, from God. The prophets, the biblical Hebrew prophets, they, all of that was coming directly from God. And throughout the scriptures, talk about, hey, if somebody does something and it, whatever they say, happens or whatever, then, then they say, follow this God because that's who did it or whatever, then that's not, it was not for me. It's not, you shouldn't do that. It's all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't actually say that, like, the only people that can, be a prophet or this or that or the other, have to be from God because, he warns against false prophets.
Yeah, and it gets really cloudy then, because if we're in these like in biblical times, if you have court appointed magicians, and then you're suddenly having to make these laws of like, well, magic can't be practiced because it comes from the devil, but then you have somebody who's like, well, I've been sent by God, so my magic isn't evil. I think that then, because of the fear of the reality of the results of what these magicians were doing, the fear is so real. It's just the natural conclusion is to be like, well, all magic needs to be outlawed. All magic has to be evil. It all has to come from the devil, because we can't ever be sure who's acting on the side of God and who's not.
Right. And I think that that's probably a big part of it in the going into the various religious bullshit stuff. Is that's probably really what started this. Like, it's, I can't control it and I can't say for sure, this person's good, this person's bad, this, where are you getting your information from? Where are you getting, kind of stuff. And yeah, then yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I know. There's not like an easy jumping off point from that. It's like, unless we want to have a conversation of, well, I mean, maybe sometime we should have a conversation on like metaphysics and law. I know we talked about that before of like this perception, and a lot of these, I mean, a lot of these topics tend to overlap and have
Right.
intertwining aspects of it. But I did think that it was worth mentioning of, like, there's serious historical evidence that psychic abilities were not only taken seriously, but were in some cases revered greatly or greatly feared. And I feel like a lot of these written texts are not pointing toward, as the scientific community would like to leave you to believe, like pointing towards acts of science that they couldn't really explain at the time because they didn't have the knowledge and resources to make these calculations or whatever. I do think that there were more occurrences of supernatural phenomena in our world, because we were open to that.
Right. And that's just what I was going to point out is that, yeah, up until, modern times, essentially, the world as a whole, I mean, and again, like we said earlier, a lot of places still do fully believe in magic or, good and evil, that there is a good God and the devil, and, or something to that, effect. And it, you know, modern America, essentially, now kind of, the devil's a joke. The devil doesn't really exist, and all this kind of stuff. And God is essentially the same, a joke and doesn't exist, or whatever, so it's so easy to discount any supernatural or unscientifically proven or provable thing, because, oh, well, if, you know, you're acting this way, you've got like multiple personalities or something, and that has to be a scientific thing. It can't be, oh, you're possessed, kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas in old cultures, and I'm sure, still some cultures today that aren't, not American culture, uh, would probably, before they go into some like, oh, well, it has to be some kind of medical explanation, would go more to, well, this seems like a demonic thing, like what's going on here, so yeah, we weren't so easily just refusing to go there, essentially, uh, back when. So yeah, and I think, and I think it's interesting, like if you look at, like the miracles from the Bible and stuff like this, that in America they don't happen today. We all just assume that like whether it really happened back then or whatever, maybe not, but uh, regardless, it doesn't happen today anymore. Well, now, if you go to other parts of the world, it still happens all the time.
Right.
Like raising from the dead, biblical miracles,
Oh, absolutely.
because they still believe,
Right.
and and to me that's fascinating. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to point out that yeah, that we as a society now are just, we're just going to discount anything that is not explainable, anything that is spiritual, essentially, is, or in the unseen, cannot be real, cannot be possible, and all this kind of stuff. And um which just isn't true, but um I do also want to point out, with all this and given into the, like, Bible miracles and all this kind of stuff, that there is a difference though between uh psychic gifts, or psychic abilities, or however you want to phrase it, innate, you know things like that, and abilities given by God, like, what Moses did, with all the um, you know various whatnots. So the word is escaping me, but you know that came from God. It didn't come from any like psychic abilities or anything like that. It's, that came from God. Like the prophets, they saw a vision that came from God. It wasn't, psychic. And not to say that any of them didn't have any level of, psychic ability or whatever. But there is a difference. I just want to make sure I toss that in there, that there is a difference between something, that is given by God and something, innate psychic ability, like that. But anyway.
No, that's an interesting topic that could be explored, I think, in a future episode, because there's a lot packed into that of examples where people are um, demonstrating these very superhuman, beyond abilities, where it didn't just come from a rush of adrenaline or a neat party trick, where there's something truly mystical that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that these things have been written about, whether they are bestowed from God or bestowed from like Satan or a demonic presence. That there does seem to be these moments in humanity where there's a transference of energy in order to complete a task that otherwise would be impossible.
Right.
And I do think that this in some manner relates to psychic abilities of like we have the ability to carry out some of these superhuman feats because we're equipped to receive that supercharge of energy. Like we're set up for that communication, and
Right.
that it's we're not seeing more evidence of that here in America because we're denying that we have that
Exactly.
like there's
Exactly.
some kind of
It's
there.
kind of works on the same line, but some of it is innate and will come kind of, I guess, come from within you, or the environment. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, like with the prophets, okay, well, they saw a vision, well, I'd imagine, and I'm not an expert on this or anything, of course, but I would imagine that it would be the same kind of concept or happening in a sense, whether it was a psychic, vision, uh, or a vision that God specifically like gave you. It's like, okay, give you this vision, now go tell so and so because this is about to happen or whatever. Um, yeah, I would imagine at least that it would manifest in the same way. I personally think that though there's a knowing that happens when it comes from God, as opposed to
I think that there would be too. I think that there would be too, based off of my own clairvoyant
well,
experiences. It's
I was
like,
about to say just based off of my own experience. I mean, when I'm doing something or thinking about something and it just like something hits me and I'm like, I don't know where that came from. And I don't, but I know that it wasn't something within me. Uh,
right, yeah,
yeah,
there is a knowingness
yeah.
when you're aware. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's not just that psychic intuition or whatever. It's, comes from somewhere else. Yeah. But okay, so on that, I guess should we move? We've kind of covered, I guess, the basics of what a psychic is. So
Yeah. Maybe we
for me,
can
even
develop.
just as an empath, so being an empath, that would fall under the psychic. Like even if I didn't necessarily have any pronounced other clairs per se, but the empathy would fall under, and that would categorize as a psychic ability because it's something that is unseen and unexplained.
Yeah, well, it's that knowledge beyond of being able to perceive something without knowing. So, I'm like a great example of like the empathic abilities of like if I sat down here today and I'm just like all smiley and bubbly and blah blah blah, but you just have this like knot in the pit of your stomach, and you could just be like, "Are you really feeling okay today?" And then I was just like, "Oh, my cat died," or something, like where I would feel really sick.
Mhm.
There's no way for you to know how you knew that, how you felt that about me.
Right.
And it is that like knowingness beyond. And that,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing too happens all the time where you just sense that, somebody is portraying themselves as something, but you feel like there's a mystery underneath, there's
Yeah. Yes, I'm all too familiar with those feelings. But okay, so let's get into the uh, follow up from last episode and the live reading that we did for you and your
yeah.
work situation.
So I feel like it just ended up being this like synchronicitous coincidence that we did that reading and now we're doing this psychic episc and
But
what
are
better
there
way to talk.
synchronistic just coincidences? Are there actually?
um I don't know, it was like, was this all predetermined and we just knew it? It's like
Well, I
who's
did. I don't know about you.
um but what better way to talk about psychic abilities than to have a real life example of these things playing out. So and I'm sorry, I keep like moving my camera around, but I'm like, I keep shifting. My arm is like getting tired now of like, man, I need to go exercise because I'm only holding up a phone. Um, I'm getting worn out.
And a half though, so it's like
But a real life example of how psychic abilities can play out. So in our last recording, which we did on fortune tellers, Amaron gave me a reading. I'm at this crossroads in my life where I was presented an opportunity, and I'm at this place where it's like I have to either decide to stay on Long Island or leave Long Island. And at our last conversation, I was thinking about moving back to my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, where I know there's a lot of employment opportunities and like lower cost of living and all of those logical, rational things. But then I was offered a really spectacular spectacular job opportunity out here on Long Island that was beckoning me to stay. And then, of course, I was leaving open opportunity for option C, like the unknown. And so we did a little card reading, and the foundation of the cards really were to give us some inspiration to like unlock the imagination and engage with intuition of connecting with knowledge without really knowing where this knowledge is coming from, other than it came from within us, right? And we had a conversation that wasn't based on rational thinking. So if we were talking in terms of rational thinking for my decision, it would be like, okay, well, what is the cost of living here versus the cost of living there? What are my monthly expenses going to look like? What is the, growth projection for this job? And there are a lot of rational things that we could have discussed, but we didn't.
No, how we roll.
No. And I think for us, instead, we chose the shortcut, right? If we're talking about dealing with knowledge without knowing where the knowledge is coming from, it's like we're skipping a step. We skipped a step of research. We skipped the step of analysis and rational thinking and just jumped toward conclusions.
Right. And yeah, tapping into intuition and kind of the energy. Again, everything is energy. To kind of just jump ahead and yes, skip. I kind of hate to say it, but skip the hard work. And,
yes, right.
Like, and go ahead, but again, and I just want to, if you're watching this, you might have watched the last episode, and, but I'm just going to toss this in there. It was not a predictive fortune teller reading,
right.
What, like Nicole just explained, is kind of to look at options and ideas and whatnot, but not like tell her, oh, this is what you should do, because this is going to be the end result, and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and that's really important to point out. Like, there wasn't a specific written guide of like, go do this, and this is exactly what will happen if you go do this.
Right.
What we discussed more was, my big question: should I stay? Should I go? What do I need to know about this situation? Led down a different kind of path of like, well, these are some things that you should take into consideration, because usually when we come to the psychic's table, instead of the magician's table, we're overwhelmed with emotions, right? So especially like when, like, I like doing business readings. A business professional is going to come to me when they're either hitting a brick wall and they're out of ideas, or they have so many ideas running through their head they can't take another step forward. Like, there's this moment of paralysis and shutdown that's happening. Right. And the reading kind of helps put some framework on, like, look, this is the smallest step that you can take today to just get restarted again, like in the right direction. So you pulled 5 cards for me that answered some questions to help me feel less overwhelmed emotionally, less overwhelmed with thoughts, with like that mental energy. And it really got me thinking about the situation differently. So I came into it knowing that I had to make the decision of like, am I staying? Am I going? Am I going to accept this job offer? Am I not? What's really happening here? And it all ended up shifting in a different direction, which is really interesting. So I wanted to honor these cards. If you want to talk about them. The first card that you drew was asking what my heart needs, which I think is really interesting, because I tend to leave myself out of the equation of my own life most of the time. I'm so busy worrying about helping other people or honoring other people's intentions of like feeling an obligation to accept the job offer just because it was offered to me in the first place and I feel needed there. But asking, is my heart in that, I think is really important.
Well, I
And
think just
yeah.
to interrupt you for a
Oh
second
yeah,
on
yeah.
that, because I think that that's very important, because I think in, at least in our society, I think just in general overall, um, that's so common. It's so much a common, as much as we're like fucking obsessed with ourselves, it, it that's on a surface level, and it doesn't go into a, what do I need? What do I need to take care of myself, and even on that physical level of taking care of yourself, as opposed to, oh, well, okay, I got to take care of the kids, got to take care of the hubby, got to take care of the, the boss, and all this kind of stuff. And, oh, well, no time left for me. So I'll just never, ever do anything for myself. And, we wonder why we're crumbling.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, but I feel like it's more affected towards women than men because we're definitely conditioned to
Right.
self-sacrifice for children in a
Self-sacrifice.
household and society more
Right.
so than men, unless you're talking in a military context, and that's like a whole other conversation of like
Right. Yeah, that's
sacrificing
a whole
our
other
male children to country ideals, which that's like a whole other thing.
right.
So I thought that it was really interesting to start the conversation of like, okay, where's your heart leading you? Anyways, what do you need to feel fulfilled from the inside out? Like, let's look at that inner space and try to bring it some calm. And the card that you pulled was Magic Prayer. And I took a couple notes of like it's such a vivid, beautiful card situated. Yeah, she's like
Pull it up.
situated in like water. I
Oh,
know the
so
glare.
now the camera came to me. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so when I was thinking about the card, and I appreciate the having the picture that you sent me after our conversation. When I when I think about the image of that card, to me, there's this um, feeling or essence of freedom, of feeling really free. And for me, I think the past couple of years, I've desired really greatly mobility, being able to move around freely. And I've felt really contained and stuck. And so listening to that, I have been journaling, and I picked up at the bookstore this like all about me book to try to like
Yeah.
get to know myself a little bit better and fill in some of these blank spaces of what are my dreams, what are the things that I like, what are the things that I don't like, reflecting on my life in a different way.
But that's such an excellent example of, again, like we were talking about last time, like, it's doing something like this is not supposed to be passive. It's
Right,
like, okay,
right,
information, do something with it. So
right.
you got this information, you spent some time, looking at the card then, apparently, and then, you know, acted on what, what the information and or feelings, that you got from that, and actually went out and bought a fucking book to help this situation. I mean, but that's such a perfect example of like, you don't just go to a psychic or, for I don't care, fortune teller, whatever, and just sit there and be passive about it. It's like, it's
Yeah,
a fucking waste of money if you do that, because it's, yeah, somebody has now given you some information. Well, you gonna go like shove it in a fucking drawer and not, like, I mean, you have this new information now, do something with it. So I love that. I love that you did that, because that's just such a perfect example of taking the next step after getting a reading, or anything, whether it's the cards, whatever.
I
um
went another extra step too,
oh,
um,
see,
because I
good
yeah.
student.
Um, well, it's like I felt called to honor the message of that card more than some of the other cards because as we experienced during the reading, a couple of the other cards disturbed me a little bit, and I didn't want to have my final decision on the situation be driven by fear
Mhm.
because my fear based decisions end up consistently not working out.
Right.
Whereas heart-based decisions tend to push me into a state of growth and
Right.
fulfillment.
And that alone right there, people, is just an excellent way to
Yeah,
live by. You know,
that's gold. Take it.
that
Like,
that is like we need to like just like crop that shit out and like stick on the fucking wall right there, because that is so true. And I can testify to that in my own life, that fear-based decisions never fucking work out. But yeah, when I actually spend the time and focus on, you know, my heart and soul kind of, and what that really needs, and not even, and even taking out the wants, well, I want this and I don't want that, and all this, whether it's a fear-based or not, makes so much difference in
yeah.
what the outcome really is. Whether you're using any kind of, cards or anything, just making those decisions, it's huge, to understand the fear-based decision making process and
Ooh,
everything. And we just
sorry
lost.
about that.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
It was my phone telling me, it's just like, you need to charge me. We're
Oh.
using up too much power here. I should still be good though
Okay.
for a minute.
So
Oh yeah, so the extra step, right? So part of the magic prayer is like, trying to answer that question, what does my heart really want? And so logical Virgo is like, oh, well, why don't I just get a book full of forms that I fill out, and I'll just add up all the answers and see where it leads me to. Um, but then I sat down with the book and realized how many of the answers I couldn't provide because I don't know myself well enough to answer all of the questions in the book. So I had this like immediate sense of embarrassment before I even reached page 5. And, and I'm like, all right, plan B. So I contacted Aubrey from Spiral Consciousness, and um, instead of asking her or addressing the bigger question to her about, am I staying, am I going, what am I doing? I recognize the root of the problem here is that I don't know what I want because I'm not in touch with myself anymore. And that's really what this, like, the magic prayer is. Um, the I think it's like the magic of prayer,
right.
of having that quiet, silent time. Like, even in that image, her eyes are closed, her attention is turned above her. She's alone in almost a spiritual place of suspension. And we had discussed meditation, but my mind has been so busy that every time I try to meditate, I just get lost, and I get overwhelmed, and there's just like a lot of static in my head. So I reached out to Aubrey and was like, okay, can you help me get to this place closer to my heart? Because I'm having a hard time seeing things clearly because I'm really, really overwhelmed. And so she did a session with me of like energy healing, like a Reiki kind of thing, of like chakra balancing,
Mm-hmm.
and investigating like, okay, well, which chakra here is out of whack and why, and also gave me a couple links toward song based meditation. And it was like, if you're having a hard time sorting out your thoughts, have you tried chanting during your meditation so that you have a more focal point and a positive reinforcement? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's it's like I've done some chanting before, but I never really thought about it as a means to just like clear the mental space. And that proved to be very, very effective of yeah, getting the chakras aligned. And I mean, like, that's a whole other metaphysical conversation of like, what are these chakras, how do you align them?
But that's a really good example again of God, this is like so good.
I try to be a perfect client because I'm Virgo.
I know, right? But no, it's such a perfect example of how there are so many aspects and facets to life and to us as human beings. And it's like, okay, So, you've got this over here, the anxiety about work and all this kind of stuff. And then, so we address, a little bit more of the mental, thought processes and various whatnot, but, there's more to that, there's more to life than that, so you went and addressed a, and now I think, energy work is still on a physical level. Often, it's not always, but it's something like working with the chakras or something like that, that goes to a physical level. It's like, because you get often physical manifestations of that. It's like you worry and, scattered brain and whatnot. So, I love that's just such a perfect example of how, to not just stick with, I mean, you could have come back, to the cards and whether you went to a different person or back to me or whatever, but you realize that, okay, well, the cards helped you notice that this is something that's going on. And then you realize like, okay, so what you need now is not another card. You need something, you know, else, something else addressed, with that, yeah, it's connected to this, but it's, different. And so I just absolutely love that. And I also think it's a good thing to point out that, to go to different people. I mean, because you could have come to me for energy work,
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
right. But different people bring different things. And I know I've worked with Aubrey before. She is amazing. And her energy work. So it's also, just because and I don't know if necessarily as a professional, I should really say this, but again, it's not necessarily a bad thing to work with multiple people, even if, like, okay, well, Aubrey does cards and energy and this and that. And, so do I, but we work in very different ways, and especially now as we've continued to grow, since I've known her, continued to grow and become our styles have differed greatly.
Well,
But
it can be confirming.
well, right, but also, yeah, very confirming. And it's not, you're not just getting everything from one source. And she might go about things in a way that I wouldn't have, and I might not have seen this that she pointed out to you, that or something. I mean, not to say that the end result could have been the same, but just I think it's really interesting, again, and a good thing to kind of spread out a little bit, essentially, and yeah, kind of, go, okay, we got the cards for me, and, okay, you realize you need maybe an energy shift, some sort, and so you went to another practitioner that you trusted and know, and to get, yeah, to get not just another facet worked on, but another viewpoint.
Yeah, and he had a similar conclusion, which I think is really, really interesting. That so it was like there were two parts to the session. It was a 2-hour session. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go to her, is like she is about to roll out a new program, and she's doing her beta testing. She's experimenting. She knows that I'm going to give really honest, rough feedback if like something sucks or something, of like, this wasn't really clear. You could have done this differently, or whatever.
Yeah.
So the first part was the energy work, and we didn't do this live over video. We did schedule a time together where I was like quiet, trying to meditate, and she was doing her work on her end. And then after that time, then we caught up on video and shared our experiences. And one of the things that she brought up too was it was so on the nose. So this is a really good example of psychic abilities, complementary to you, of like, okay, yeah, you need to get closer to your heart space and you need to get into meditation. And I'm like, all of my freaking messages being about meditation and looking at my heart and all these things. But what she picked up on that was really interesting was I did not tell her about my like All About Me book. She was like, what you need to do is make space in your life for yourself, and making space for yourself is very different. And she was just like, this is not about your, I do a lot of like mud masks and skincare stuff since I work at the skincare shop. She's like, it's not about you attending to that. It's really about going inside of yourself. And you do need to write things down and journal, not following a set of prompts. And she said that like very specifically. And I'm like, how did she know that I was writing it on this book thing? And she's like, normally I design journal prompts for my clients, but that's not going to be the case for you. You need to just sit down and like mind dump everything, because you have all of this chaos. And one of the ways of disarming it is channeling it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to do that through journaling. And you need to reserve, 15 minutes, a half an hour of your time at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, depending on where your mental energy is, to just brain dump onto paper. It doesn't have to make sense. Nobody has to read it about you, but this is about sorting out that
Right.
mental energy that isn't being spent in other places. And
Right.
at the end of it, she's like, then there's a reflective aspect. On the end of it, it's just like, if I'm writing about something that's enveloped in emotional chaos or confusion, because I get a lot of emotional confusion for me, and that's like a whole other conversation about my childhood. I should be reflecting on, if I could go back, how would I replay that situation differently, so I can start teaching myself how to be more emotionally uh, expressive, so that
Yeah.
I'm not ignoring the heart of like, okay, well, I just did this brain dump and I don't have to think or feel about that anymore. But how can I improve my experience? So she took that from a more literal perspective of not just in my heart, like what are my desires and dreams, but are you feeling your emotions?
Right.
How are you feeling your emotions? So I felt like it was just like a deeper dive into the things that you were talking about. Like, what's the way through freedom? The freedom is from within.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought that was really, really, really interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's such, yeah, yeah, such a good client. Uh, and such a great example of, and I'm not even going to say bringing it full circle, because I'm thinking that we're not quite full circle yet, but it is, you didn't just like take this one bit and stay here and just stick with that. You kept moving down the line and getting more information and doing more work and all this kind of stuff to start coming around. And, yeah, there might be at some point, okay, well, you need to go, you know, get a fucking astrology reading or something, or, to help, or something, but again, or another card reading, or, who knows, but,
Oh, yeah.
again, it's, yeah, such a good example of working with that information and not just staying stagnant with it. And, um, you know, uh, yeah, working down the line to try and bring it full circle at some point. So,
Yeah, it's a really magic magic and manifestation is something that we're addressing in a future episode.
right.
But I
Yeah.
think it's really important that you've already commented that, this is not a passive experience. If you want this experience to be effective, if you want your reading to really hold weight and take value, you have to take action on it. Like, I can't be a passive participant in my own life. Like, I have to go forward towards it. And we go, or I go to psychics in order to know not just which way to go, but like how to get there. I guess it's more like climbing a wall or climbing a mountain of like, I need some safety ropes here, or like, what's the best shoe to wear or something like that. But I still have to decide to go and,
Right.
which
And
foothold to
you
step
still
on.
have to decide to buy that shoe or buy this shoe
Right.
or,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there's still, you know, uh, again, whether you're even taking the predictive or non-predictive approach on, things, there's still action steps I mean, you still can't be passive, on it. And but anyway,
Well,
um,
the action, I think, in relation to magic, I think the important part about taking any action, even if it's just a small step, it is a vibrational acknowledgement that the message was received.
yeah.
And if you are acknowledging through that vibration, through that action, that the message was received, you're more likely to get more helpful information coming your way. Like
Mhm.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like if you feel stuck, more is going to come in if you keep stepping closer toward it.
Yeah.
Um, so the other cards,
Yeah.
'cause there's more cards. Um, so I tried not to focus too much on the thing that I was afraid of, and that was the card of solitude, of being alone, of and for me
Yeah.
it's like when you see that, yeah,
Pull the
that
card
like
back up
little
if it'll come back to me. Okay, there we go. So solitude. Okay.
being on the lonely island, and it looks so much like being out here on Long Island, and it did get me thinking of like I am afraid of being stuck out here, of not being mobile. So it's like if my heart space, as I identified, is like that card radiates with an energy of freedom, the magic prayer to me feels like freedom, then the opposite of freedom is imprisonment and solitude. Solitary confinement, imprisonment is like the worst kind of imprisonment. And I didn't want to focus so much on that, but I ended up focusing more on the opposite, which is connecting. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to connect with everybody in order to see the way forward more clearly of, can we communicate together? And then I did my like rational Virgo homework of, I do need to complement this with some real world steps. So I took a lot of time to sit down and craft a proposal for the job offer.
Nice.
I started making option C, like crafting my own option C of like, maybe A and B are too confining. That's not creative enough for me and who I am. And maybe I've just been afraid to ask. And maybe that's what I need to do, of just ask the question I'm afraid to ask because it's so close to my heart. My heart doesn't want to be rejected and all of these complex, complicated human feelings. So I worked really hard on that, and I did what I could to demonstrate them my level of technical proficiency and that I was really working on their behalf. And so I created my own job position for them that would allow me to work remotely on their behalf to fulfill a lot of the needs of the company.
Yeah.
And it was a totally magical experience delivering this proposal to them. I mean, I did the whole thing. I even got like a cute little like plastic cover sheet that in like corporate offices and gave it to them. And they were just like blown away. They were just like, what? Like it was yeah, like I just like because I figured just like no, if I'm going after something that is going to get me somewhere, and I don't mean like a literal place, but get me closer to my heart where I have free range over my mobility and my creativity, and I'm harnessing these skills that I've cultivated over a decade. I need to honor that because that's honoring myself. So it's like I didn't create this proposal for them. I really in essence, created it for me. And that it was like joyful, like I was proud of it at the end of it. It felt
Yeah.
really good. Um, and it ended up being a combination of the last three cards. So like the staying card was encouragement, and the leaving card was the coming to life. And it was extremely encouraging. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Encouragement and coming to life here is the kind of
Yeah,
get.
where it's like the little nudge and this, showing, oh, that was my battery notification again. Sorry about that. Um, the little nudge forward to grow up a little bit, and that expression of fun, lightness, creativity, pomp and circumstance kind of thing. And it's like I really harnessed a lot of that energy. It's like they were encouraging me to stay because they know that I had certain skill sets that would be good for the business. But
Mhm.
I know for me, I need the freedom to go, but I've been afraid to go because I'm afraid of instability, of being on the open road without having a safety net or something. And it's
Right.
like, well, what if I leave my safety net with them? And they were just it's like if I get emotional about it, I'll cry like a lot.
And don't cry because then we know because I'm gonna cry
You're gonna
and it's
cry,
gonna
and
be one blubbering video, which we
I
do
know
not want.
they were just so supportive. They were really excited. They just want me to be a part of their team in any capacity possible because they know that I'm the right person to drive some of these things forward for their growth. And so
Awesome.
they're encouraging me, really, like they are encouraging me, and this opportunity is allowing me to come to life because now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this opportunity where I actually have money in the bank that I've saved up that's allowing me to leave, and it's not just going to burn up in smoke. I have a way to maintain a living on the road. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I'm meeting with them later today to come to terms as far as like the money part of it. But I know that they'll take care of me because I'll take care of them. And I love that like the missing piece card, right, was kind of like that option C of like the missing piece of um, what else did I need to know?
Right.
And
What you might be missing or yeah, what you need to know or something. Yeah.
And I was terrified, of course, of that card. Like it made me feel like ill to just look at it of like rock bottom. That's like the worst thing in the world.
And again, if anybody saw the video from last time when we did the live reading, you could see on the video just poor Nicole's face just like green, like
Like the blood drained from my face. Like, oh my gosh. Um, because I am afraid of because when we hear about rock bottom, of hitting bottom, um it means you have nothing left, right? Like there's nothing there. You're as low as you can possibly go. And you were like trying to talk me down from that cliff of fear and anxiety, um, in that place of overwhelm and loss. But now I can see that it really was the more positive things that you were talking about of you have this I have a clean slate to build it. It's like a canvas of I can paint my future any color I want, if I realize that I'm holding the brushes here and that I really have that. And because I took the actions to create these circumstances based off of the information from the reading, um, more magical things started taking place. So it went beyond, yeah, right. So it snowballed. It went beyond talking to them. So like the conversation went really well with them. We're feeling really good together. Um, I ended up getting approached by another company, like out of the blue, asking me if I was taking on any remote work. And I was just like, this is like, this can't even be happening right now. Like this, is this real? And I had a conversation with him this morning and we went over some details. He said he was going to be sending a project proposal over to me at early next week, and that we would be able to hammer out the numbers, and that if we do really well working together on this first project, he's going to throw me regular work while I'm on the road. And
wow.
I'm just like, what? Come on.
Wow.
It gets better. So I'm telling Neil about all these things, and he's working with an emerging media company out here on Long Island, and he's been picking up some side gigs too. And so he started telling his company about the remote work that I've created for company A, the like automotive company. And and so this guy's like, so you're going to be doing some work on the road, right? He's like, what do you think about doing some blogging? So we're getting sponsorship for going to events, and we're going to get recording equipment and all of this technical on the road recording stuff
Oh, wow.
free to make
Wow.
content for this other company. And I'm like, this is just unreal, right? Like so I have two jobs, and then we have a third company that's giving us equipment. And then and then I had a falling out with the job that I'm at right now of like, we had this big, huge communication thing. Like, we were fighting, which is not like me. I don't fight with my employers. But I usually fall within myself, and then I cry, and then I leave, and I like wrap myself in my own shame and low self esteem.
Right.
But this time, and so this was on Friday during like chaotic energetic storms.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah.
I just,
Oh, this weekend. All right. Yeah, we're not getting into that.
so like we were going back and forth on, the role and duties and how to fulfill the requirements of the role that I'm in right now. And I hadn't told them yet that I was very sure on leaving. I was like waiting for the right time, and that's a complicated kind of circumstance. But all of a sudden, in the middle of the flight, I just blurted out, because she was just like, "Well, things are going to be different in the summertime. You'll be able to take on the projects that you want." And I'm like, "I'm not going to be here in the summertime, but let's not even talk about it." Um, and, for a moment, like, she was really shaken, because then there was a shift in power in the conversation. Because you usually, between employer and employee, the employer holds the power because they're the one giving the paycheck. And when
Right.
I'm essentially saying, well, your paycheck doesn't mean anything to me anymore because I'm leaving for somebody else, well, now I hold the power because I'm the only person that they have right now as part of the team.
Right.
And, so there was that moment of like, okay, there's a shift. How do we deal with this shifting dynamic? And at the end of the conversation, it went in this other direction of like, well, how much time are you investing in these other projects? Would you still be interested in working on remote projects for us? We haven't really tapped your full potential here. Maybe you could be doing some things. And I'm like, I don't want to overwhelm myself with work on the road. I want to be able to enjoy some of it too. But this is like amazing. It's
Right.
like this sign of like, you got it. Here's everything showing you you're going to be okay. You need to just go after your actual dream, and it's going to happen to you. So I've just been beside myself the past few days of like, is this really happening? Is this really
Wow.
happening to me? Like,
Well, and see, and
I'm
I
nothing
think
like that.
that, yeah, that's just so amazing. And it's one of those things that, uh, even after years of doing stuff like this, and being more in tune with, like manifesting and uh metaphysics and whatnot, um it's just always blows my mind when I hear stuff like this, or it happens to me, or whatever, because it's so amazing, and such a great, again, example of what can happen when you actually take control of your life and
Yeah.
take conscious steps in a direction that is not chosen out of fear. It's not chosen um out of anything other than soul searching, essentially. And what happens, what can happen at that point? um the world just opens up in
Mhm.
such an amazing way. And um again, so this was all pretty much over this weekend. So of course we'll want another update, uh, as time goes by. But
It happened so fast. It's like I almost feel like I should put a bunch of like disclaimers over this. Like, okay, it's not like it rains blessings in an instant every single time I get a reading, right? Like
right, right,
sometimes the best steps forward are the really small ones in order to have lasting lifelong lasting effects.
right,
And my case is a really spectacular one. But I'll say that it didn't just come out of this one reading with you. Like we've had other readings in the past
right.
to shift my mindset and my perspective and the way that I view and process emotions or view and process circumstances and life
Mhm.
events. And it wasn't just in a vacuum with you. Like I've been actively seeking help on how to transform my life in big ways.
Mhm.
For many people, many sources, some psychic and some not psychic. I've been actively pursuing this. And it just seems like you're just catching me on video at one of the more transformative points.
Well, I think, but I mean, it was something that, is obvious. I mean, it's, this is, a card reading is something that like can be visibly, kind of perceived as what is going on, and as we're talking and you can see the cards and you can, hear me talking about it and then you talking about it and all this kind of stuff, so, but I think it's also, yeah, kind of with that disclaimer, of, um, and yeah, it seems like, all right, well, we just, we did that and turn around and poof, everything just like the heavens opened up and like fucking shit, the big fucking like rainbow brick on you, uh, but it was something that like when we did that reading, you were pretty much at the cusp of like something has to be done, decision has to be made. Like I think it was like within that week or something. Um,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
was something that was like, okay, well, at some undefined point in the future, I have to do something or something like, we were kind of working within a very fixed amount of short time to get a result and kind of see what might happen, and what decision needed to be made and how you were going to go about it and everything. So it's, not everything is going to be like that when you go get a reading or anything like that. No, but yeah, it's and I think it's again another good point that you made of the yeah you kind of easy to look at this in a bubble, of just this reading, just this, circumstance and everything. But yeah, really, we've been working on this kind of part of your life, for a while now. Um,
Yeah.
and it's, it just so happens that, okay, well, this specific situation and all this, and it's kind of has all culminated into this point, which is typically what life does, but it's sorry. Nicole's fiddling
Like,
with the camera and stuff, so it's like distracting me. I'm like
I hope it's
my
fun. Like I finally really did run out of battery life, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going off on this really amazing thing, and then I'm just go to black, and then it'll be over.
yeah, right. You're more like, God, I'm getting tired. I need to lie down. She's so like she never stops talking.
No, I'm just like I can only hear her, and I'm at 3%.
Anyway, so
But
yeah.
yeah, no, and it's all part of the journey, and it's like if we wanted to put this in an analytical context of like, okay, well, it's like I'm now like riding on the cusp of magic because it was activated between us. Like you provided me the tool, I went and I used it,
Mhm.
and when I first started using the tool, it wasn't being used effectively. I asked for another opinion, and they're just like, oh, you just need to make this side step to the left. And it
Right.
was like the more I was listening and demonstrating that I was listening, the more information comes in. It's almost like there's a calibration time. And I think some people
Yes.
give up too soon because they're just like, oh, I went and I did what the psychic told me to do. It's just like, well, we're translating a spiritual language and we don't always get the nuances of the right thing. It's again like, you see an apple and it's red, I see an apple and it's green.
Right. Well,
Maybe it's not an apple, maybe it's supposed to be apple juice. Like there's
right. And it's not only that, but then you've got to take into account the human aspect of it. I am me and you are you. And, when I say something, I might use a term that I totally know. I know exactly what I mean when I say this, but, I grew up in the South, so you grew up not in the South. I forget where, Columbus.
oh,
That's right. And, so what term I might be completely familiar with, and a lot of people might be familiar with it too, but you might not, you know,
right.
again, it's like, and again, I, of course, would hope that, you know, um, you and, or, client or friend, or, whatever the situation is, uh, would go, what the fuck? Like, what does that mean? Like, if you didn't know it. But again, it's a lot of people don't do that. And
Yeah, a
a lot
lot of
of
people
times, like
don't.
if it's over like a written form or something, it's difficult to, ask those questions. But yeah, it's like I might state something in a way that I meant this, but you heard that, you know,
Mm.
or it just, it could be any breath of miscommunication essentially is, what that is. But again, it's not, and I, you know, going back and trying to remember, doing the readings, like I don't remember getting any specific, like, this is how you need to meditate, or this is how you need, it was just like, you need to do that, so again, it, you know maybe I missed it in translation from my, feelings and intuitiveness or whatever, or maybe I didn't get it, and maybe you needed to take that further step. And again, yeah, if you just gave up with, well, I can't meditate because I'm, can't do this or can't do that, uh, you didn't. You go, okay, well, this is an issue. I see this is what I need to do, but I can't do it. So what, and you took another step to figure out, okay, well, maybe there's something else I can do to help me get, accomplish this, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's important to understand. It's like, yeah, there can be miscommunication between, kind of consciousness and subconsciousness, if you will. And on the psychic level, and then also the miscommunication on the human level, as I'm trying to communicate whatever I'm getting, from whatever source, to and how, and that whole, you know um, um men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing, of we speak different languages, and it's not just males and females, it's everybody, and for multiple reasons, you know, everybody speaks a different language, to some degree or another.
Well, I think one of the more concrete examples of the differences between our interpretations on the reading was like the last card, the card of rock bottom. And it's like you saw it so clearly as this card of hope, of like, look, there are paths that are leading you toward a portal. There's a blank canvas here in front of you. Like this is where you can, this is a space where you can create things. And I'm looking at it like, oh my gosh, all I see is disparity and struggle, and like this is going to be awful. And
Right.
I had to go back within myself and say, like, well, am I asking this person to tell me what I want to hear? And sometimes I think we want to hear confirming negativity. Like, yep, I'm definitely stuck in this box, like, and instead I had to like, no. I need to open this up, think about it differently, or choose not to focus on the fear aspects of my response to the situation and
Right.
focus on the positive aspects of it if I'm not ready for that. Because I think that as much as we want help, we, tend to want the easy. I think we all want the easy way out of, the magical thing to just drop down from the sky. And
Right.
life is work, and the good best parts of life are a lot of work. But
Yeah.
that's what so great when you accomplish the thing. So
Right.
there's
And
lots of
yeah, and I think, again, that's, good example of, first of all, the when you're in the middle of the situation, um, it's like, okay, I, you know, I can, read the cards, if you will, which, anybody can do. Um, but, I've spent time learning and training and, getting familiar with that practice. Uh, but for myself, like if I am in the middle of a situation that's got me like, either upset or scatterbrained or, what, not in an optimal, calm mental space, you know, I probably don't need to try and do this on my own. That's when, like you weren't in a good place to pull your own cards. Because you were so entrenched in the situation itself, you probably wouldn't have seen clearly. You
I
know,
pulled my cards and I did not believe them.
well, and there's that too. But then again, it's also such a great example of, you know, there's, when you go to a reader, and okay, well, this is my interpretation. This is what I'm saying, to you of whatever. Um, and then you take that and add to it.
Hmm.
You spent time looking at the cards and seeing what you saw in it. And I'm saying, saw in both the literal and metaphysical form. And went with that. You spent time looking at the magic prayer, card, and literally looking at the image and, seeing what came to you, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever, when you were looking at the card and thinking on that, and uh, then, so on with the rest of them. And so I think it's, again, yeah, the good example of the time when you need to kind of get that outsider's perspective. um and you can't always just, pull your own cards or whatever. You need to have somebody that's outside of the situation to help you with that. But then also it's like, yeah, you then take that information and mull with it, and you find the truth in it, your truth in it, if you will, of, whether it's exactly what I said or some form of what I said, or it triggers, what I said triggers what you actually needed, you know. Because sometimes that's the way it is. Sometimes, like, that you could have come back to me and said, yes, I fucking, like, that rock bottom card was not at all what you said, but it also wasn't what you thought it was. It was like something else. But when you stopped to think about it and look at the card yourself and spend some time with it and look over what I said and all this kind of stuff, then it hits you, uh, that this is actually, what you're supposed to take away from that, which isn't what I said and wasn't what you were thinking, but, because sometimes it happens that way too. And it's not, but it's just such a great example of, yeah, that, yeah, don't just, don't just take what I said, as gold,
Yeah, or as throwaway, right? Like it's
right, or
not
just
like
throw away. Exactly.
a
Mm-hmm. It's
fortune
just,
cookie. of like, oh, that this message sounds good or this message doesn't sound good. Okay,
Right.
what's your
Or that can't possibly be, you know, there couldn't be any possibly good, explanation for that card. So it has to be, I'm doomed to the pit of hell or whatever. And, life is just always, I'm never going to get out of this pit and everything. And, so yeah, you can't kind of go to either extreme with that. It's kind of, I guess you would, take what I say with a grain of salt kind of thing. It's like, well, this is, my interpretation, and then how I'm going to convey it back to you, in the way that I speak, and you need to.
people do consume psychic readings like popcorn of like, oh, this is fun for right now, like, and I think that's when it gets into that oops, sorry, when it gets to that part where of trickiness or crystal ball gypsy fortune telling of like,
Right.
that is popcorn psychic reading. A powerful psychic reading is there's more work to it. There's just
Right.
more work to it, and that you're really taking it in, and I mean, I think that there is room to say that not every day is a good day for the psychic. Like, we all get cloudy, we all
Oh
get
yeah.
interpretations.
Oh yeah.
More often than not, um you're probably going to hit on something important,
Mhm.
going to activate the experience if like the person getting the reading is also taking action on it,
Right.
and that's the thing.
But I think it's also a good thing to point out with that, talking about like the popcorn readings and kind of thing, is that you saw, okay, you got this reading from me and saw that you needed something else. You needed more, and you didn't go and get another reading asking the same questions.
I did not. That's
Right.
that's a really important thing. Yeah, I did not
Right.
ask the same question.
Right. You went to another, psychic or metaphysician, whatever you want to, whatever you want to say. Um, and even if you had asked for a card reading, you wouldn't ask the same questions because you realize like, okay, I kind of got, information on that specifically. So, but this is something, you honed in on the heart thing, so let's dig in deeper on that, and ask different questions. You didn't go asking the same question. But I also think again, that it was good that you actually changed modalities as well. You went for, energy healing because you realized, you didn't need another card reading. You needed something else. Um,
Sometimes it can be overwhelming if you get too many messages. you,
right,
you just get as confused and overwhelmed as you were at the beginning, and that's
right.
like, what do you do with that? Like,
Mhm.
you just
Yeah,
then think think again. And
right.
it's a mistake that I think that we all make at some point, or at least like I've definitely made that mistake of asking the question too many times because I wasn't ready. Like, sometimes you're just not ready, and that's okay too. If I
Mhm.
could go back in time and tell myself, 5 or 6 years ago, like, oh, things are gonna get better. It's just gonna take a minute, like, maybe I would have acted differently, and that has to do with faith, like faith in yourself, faith that the universe has your back, that that you're here for a reason and you're not going to be led astray if you're keeping open. Like, if you are doing your part, the universal energies around you are going to respond.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but on that note, we should probably wrap it up. Here, I think we've gone over time again. Uh, uh, but this has been great. Getting the feedback on on the reading was super great. I mean, just as a reader, it's really great to hear that anyway. But just as your friend and just as even just as a bystander to get like to see how you know everything has just come together is just amazing. But again, because you took control and you took action steps and you know action steps to figure out what you needed to do, and then you face the fear of doing it, because again, I know you, I know that was so terrifying for you
It
to
was, I was
create
like
your own
sweating.
presentation and take control, and instead of going in, especially something like a business situation like that, where essentially a job interview. And typically, I mean, because this, what most of us do, I know this from experience, you go in and you're already defeated, and like whatever they tell me, I'll just, okay, that's, I just need the job, and there's, just, and instead you fought through that and realized that that's not what you needed to do. You needed to do, this, and you needed to go in there, with your fucking, get to use that really bad example of, pencil skirt and high heels and like, motherfucker, I'm in charge here, kind of attitude, but that's, what you needed to do. And you fought through that fear and that initial block of not being able to get, kind of accomplish your homework, in a sense, from the reading and everything. You fought through that and figured out, okay, well, let's, work on this. And, so you were able to do that. And then actually fighting through the fear of like, okay, well, shoot, if this is what I'm supposed to do, but, that's absolutely terrifying in and of itself. Um, but yeah, it's kind of what can happen when you take charge of your life and realize that you don't just have to sit back and be passive and let whatever, wants to happen to you. I'm so happy for you, and I can't wait to hear how it progresses.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing of, it's like I sought help, I took action on the help, and that action was answered, fortune with great fortune, right? Um, but nothing's happening yet. A lot of it is still conceptually driven at this point, because I have gone through moments of manifestation like this before, where I seek counsel, I take action. The action is met with an answer. Particular for me, a lot of it has to do with employment or housing. Um, and then the job ended up not working out. Like the job, ended up being totally toxic. So it's
Right.
like, what is this driving me to? Well, I can say, at least in this specific circumstance, that toxic job landed me the conversation that I had earlier today with the remote work company. So it's like sometimes these really bad things, and it was that toxic situation that allowed me to find my teeth in my skin to stand up
Oh,
and oh, I heard it too.
yep. So sorry,
I,
say that last sentence over again.
like I think it's Zoom telling us we've been on too long.
I know,
Um,
right?
right, yeah. But no, it was like like that toxic circumstance led to me having the skin and teeth that I needed to stand up and say, like, this situation is wrong, this situation doesn't feel good, it's not right. Of giving me a voice in the workplace, and that's been a really important development for
Right.
me in the couple of years.
And that's another really good point, that sometimes what seems or feels like something bad is, all right, it might be something bad, but it's needed,
Needed.
to some degree. It's a lesson that you need to learn or something. And I mean, and it could go like super deep like that, like, well, you need this experience because without it, you're not, for whatever reason, your personality or whatever is not going to learn this lesson, or gain this experience, or whatever it is that you need. Or it could be something as simple as like, yeah, it's, because I've been there too, where, I get this job and it just seems like it's so perfect and it's going to be awesome and everything, and it turns out to be like fucking hell. And but without that, I wouldn't have made the connections to then find the most like perfect fucking job I've ever had, that paid plenty of money and the hours were great. And I loved my boss and I loved my job. And I mean, everything was just perfect, and I had benefits and all this kind of, so without going through, unfortunately, that shit job, I would not have, gotten to this other one. And yeah, it sucked going through that. That was, oh, but, looking back, I see, well, damn, that was so worth it. 3 months of that hell to get, the other job was like, yeah, I'd do that again, knowing the outcome, and it's hard to see that when you're in it for sure. But a lot of times that's what it is. And and it could be something kind of on that simple side of just a stepping stone, because, that's how you need that. Your connection is going to be there to get you to the next, thing, or yeah, something super deep. Like it's a lesson that you got to learn, kind of thing. So that's another really good point, is that you see how, regardless of, okay, well, you manifested, before, and that's the job you ended with. And, it could be part of the, well, maybe you chose that one out of a fear-based decision again, and it wasn't the right thing, but thankfully, the universe was like, hey, well, we'll send you this bone anyway. Or it could be that that's full on like what you needed and you made the right decision for sure, and it just had to be a shit situation because you weren't supposed to stay there, and but yeah, so again, yeah, we're kind of so excited, and everything seems to be like so amazing, and so like, oh my god, this is gonna be it's so magical and everything. But yeah, again, it's like nothing's actually happened yet, really. It's like, and you could end up with all these, if you got like 5, 6, 10 offers of like remote work, which is exactly what you want to do, and all this, and at the end of the line, you're just with one of them.
Right. And I'm trying to align.
And right. So it's I guess to the viewers, like, don't be surprised if we come back next time and like all this has changed significantly. But it's because that's how life happens. But the fact that all of this kind of came down on you like it did is just like, wow. And like, total confirmation that, the work that you did and the steps that you took and everything, make a difference,
Oh, absolutely.
In the long run, even not just with what, we did in this last month or so, but, even further back, between, what you've done on personal levels, trying to grow, and then also, your experiences in business and whatnot previously.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a life learning lesson. Like, I'm going to take away from this for the rest of my life,
Right.
and that's the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you should do, for sure. So, all right. Well, yeah, let's wrap it up here. And yeah, so excited. This was so great. And now we know what a psychic is. And I won't be offended when Nicole calls me a psychic.
Yeah. Right? Like, we can own that. Like, we should
Right?
reclaiming the word psychic for what it really is.
Right. And I won't have to put a neon sign in my window and, but all right. Well, this has been great. And thank you all for joining. And I hope you had fun like we did. And so I think next time we're talking about manifestation, I think something like magic or manifestation or something like that.
Magic or manifestation. I forget exactly what order, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. You'll you'll see what we decide when we do it. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time. Bye.